Hey everyone, so this is Mohamed Labouardy. I'm the author of Pipeline as Code, and in this demo I will try to show you how you can build up a CI/CD pipeline from scratch for a React web application. All the resources and the code source that I will be using on this demo will be available on my GitHub account. So with that being said, let me show you the application that we'll try to integrate during this live session. So I have already built a web application using the React Web Framework. This application will simply a search engine for movies. So basically you have a search bar. On this search bar you can search for a movie, and basically the web application, it uses the movie database API, which is a public API similar to IMDb, which allows you to search for specific movies based on keywords. So this is what's happening behind. I will show you the code source later on. However, it's not the main topic of this session, so I will go through the source code quickly. However, you will find all the resources on the GitHub repository afterward if you want to get deep dive into the web application architecture. But basically it's quite simple. So we have just a search bar, and on each keystroke we call the movie database API to fetch the results, and then we just display the results on the page. So basically this is the application that we'll try to integrate during this live session. Before we start the integration part, let me show you the CI server that we'll be using during this demo. So the CI server will be simply Jenkins. So I have already deployed the Jenkins cluster in advance. So the Jenkins is basically split into two main components. So you have a master component and the workers. The master component is simply a server which exposes the web dashboard that you can see right now, and then you have workers, which are simply nodes on which the jobs will be built on, and you have the master which will be responsible on scheduling the build jobs on these workers. So I have already deployed the Jenkins cluster on my AWS console, and I have already set up all the CI environments in advance. However, you will find all the resources that I have used to deploy this cluster on the book GitHub repository. So for instance, if you go to, I guess, chapter 5, so here you will have all the Terraform resources that has been used to deploy this Jenkins architecture. So basically, to deploy this architecture, I have been using Terraform, and I have written a Terraform template for each component. So for instance, here you have the template file responsible for deploying the Jenkins master. So Jenkins master is simply an EC2 instance in this case, and I have configured a security group to allow inbound traffic on port 8080, which is the port on which the Jenkins dashboard is exposed to. And I have also configured a load balancer on front of my EC2 instance to expose the web dashboard. So I don't want my EC2 instance to be exposed to the public, so that's why I'm having a load balancer in front of my EC2 instance. That way I will allow only the inbound traffic on port 8080. And I have done the same also for the Jenkins workers. So the Jenkins workers are simply behind an auto-scaling group. So I want my workers to be scalable based on the numbers of jobs or the workload that we are trying to integrate on Jenkins. So instead of having a fixed number of workers, here I'm setting up an auto-scaling group, An auto-scaling group basically in AWS is a number of instances in which you define a minimum and a maximum. So here you have a minimum of 2 instances and a maximum of 10. And to add or remove workers, I have defined some CloudWatch policies to trigger a scale-in or a scale-out events. So basically, if the CPU utilization of my Jenkins workers is higher than 80%, I will add a new Jenkins worker to the cluster. And if the CPU utilization is less than 20%, then Jenkins worker will be removed. That way we'll have always a self-efficient and cost-effective Jenkins cluster. So for this demo, I have started with 2 workers. However, if we start building or integrate more applications and having a heavy project, a new worker will be added automatically to the Jenkins cluster. So as you can see here, for this demo, I have already created my Jenkins cluster, and I have already two EC2 instances running as a workers. With that being said, and now we have our Jenkins cluster is running, let's start the integration process of our React web application. So for this web application that I have already written in advance, let me show you the source code first, and then we'll start the integration process. So here I'm using Visual Studio Code as my editor, and I have already created a React web application, and I have defined some components. So basically, if I show you the application skeleton, so it's basically we have a search bar component, and then we'll look through the movies attribute, and then for each movie we'll just display the movie component, and we pass the movie object to this component. And to get the list of movies, I'm just using the MovieDB API, and this API will return a list of movies. Once I get these results, I pass them to the movies attribute, and from there I show them on the page. So basically, it's simple web application. So to start the integration process, what we need first is to create our remote repository in which we will store our application source code. So for this demo, I will be using GitHub. However, you can use any other system control, versioning control system, or you can use something like GitLab or Bitbucket, or even as SVN repository. So let's go back to GitHub, and let's create a repository for our project. So this repository, I will call it movies aggregator. Now I will go back to my editor, and then I will add a new origin. So I can now push everything to the master branch. So for now I will go with the single branch. However, in a few minutes we will see how you can use an advanced branching model like GitFlow. So if I refresh this page, I should have my application code source. So now we have our remote repository with all the source code of our web app. To integrate this application to Jenkins, we need to write a Jenkins file. So basically, a Jenkins file is just a template file in which you write all the stages or all the steps that tells Jenkins what it need to do. So basically, all the commands that you want to be run on your remote repository, you describe them on this Jenkins file. So there is 2 ways of writing a Jenkins file. You can use the scripted or the declarative approach. For this demo, I will be using the scripted approach. However, on my book, I have covered both approaches. I prefer scripted approach because it gives more flexibility, and if you come up with if you have already been a developer in the past, and I think it's easier to adopt this approach because it's the same concepts that you have seen in languages like Java or Groovy and all the the concepts that you have been using and these languages can be also used while writing a Jenkins file. So I will write a Jenkins file, and on this Jenkins file, first I will describe the machines on which I want my CI/CD pipeline to be executed. To do so, I need to define a node parameter, and on this node parameter, I need to give the label of the machines on which I want the pipeline to be executed on. So for this demo, I have already created the Jenkins workers, which are simply some EC2 instances. And on these EC2 instances, I have given them some labels. So let me first connect to my Jenkins dashboard. So as you can see, for this Jenkins worker, I have given it the label workers. So that way I can assign build jobs to this EC2 instances, to this EC2 instance using the workers label. So here I will define the node on which I want my build job to be executed on as workers. And then on this node section, I can here define the stages that I want to be executed on Jenkins. So the first stage will be the checkout stage, which is basically responsible of cloning the GitHub repository. So this is the first stage that will be running on Jenkins. So I will just commit this stage to the master branch. Now I can go back to Jenkins and I will create a new job for my application. So for this application, I will create a job called Movies Aggregator. The type of the project will be a multi-branch pipeline, because basically we want to support multiple branches and we'll be using multiple branches on the project. So it will be easier to integrate these branches with this type of configuration. And basically, multi-branch pipeline will simply tell Jenkins to scan your GitHub repository and scan all the branches that are available looking for a Jenkins file. So each time there is a Jenkins file available on a branch, it will be detected and Jenkins will create a new sub-project for the branch that has been discovered. That way you can easily integrate your GitHub branches or Git branches without creating or duplicating job configurations every time you create a new branch. So for the source of our code, for now we are using GitHub, so I will be using the GitHub plugin. I have already created the credentials, and for the repository URL, I will just copy the clone HTTPS URL. You can also use SSH if you want. For the discovering behaviors, I will set it as default, but we'll see later how you can customize it. And if I click on apply and save, as you can see, Jenkins has scanned the GitHub repository and has discovered that there is a master branch that contains a Jenkins file. So it automatically created a new sub-project for the master branch, and then it executed automatically the pipeline. So as you can see, for now we have one single stage, which is the checkout stage. So if we click on this stage, we can see that the project has been cloned and it fetches the latest changes on the GitHub repository. So basically this is a simple pipeline, so we can go further and start integrating our application. But before we do so, I want to show you how you can integrate Slack notifications within your CI pipeline. And to do so, I will be using the Slack notification plugin. So here you can find this plugin and all the available plugins of the Jenkins community on plugins.jenkins.io. I have already installed the Slack notification plugin, and I have already configured my Slack workspace to receive or to allow Jenkins to send me notifications. And I have also created a token that I have configured on the Manage Jenkins configure system section, and then on the Slack section I have defined the workspace and also the Slack token. Here I have defined a default channel. However, you can override the channel in which you want to send the notification during the CI pipeline. So to send the Slack notification, I will be using the cell called notification Slack, and this instruction basically it's a custom function that I have written in advance, which uses the Jenkins Slack plugin method. So basically this method, let me copy paste the method. So basically this method, it takes the build status as a parameter, and based on the build status it will write a message, and then it uses the Slack send official method, which is the method provided by the Slack plugin that we have installed on Jenkins, to send a message to the right Slack channel. In this case it will be notifications channel. And as you can see, for the message that we'll be sending, so basically we send the job name, the status, and also the build number. So for the build number and job name, we are using the default environment variables that are exposed by the Jenkins job. We are also sending extra informations like the commit message and the commit author. And the commit message and the commit author, as you can see, they are custom methods. So there are methods that I have also written in advance. So let me show you how they looks like. So this method, for instance, the commit author, the commit message, and commit ID. So basically here I'm using some basic get commands to parse the get commands output to fetch the message and also the author name. So that way I will be sending a Slack notification with the customizable and personalized message about the job that has been built by Jenkins. And now if we integrate this to the remote repository, we should have a new Slack notification. So let me click on scan repository now to first Jenkins to scan repository, and if there is a new changes, the sub project for the master branch will be executed. So now if we click on console output, we can see that a Slack notification has been sent. So let me show you the Slack message. So as you can see, this is the Slack message that has been sent to this notifs channel. So here you have the name of the job as well as the branch, the status, the build ID, the message, and the author name. You have also the URL to access directly the job on Jenkins.